All right, so ready to dive into this deep dive on Atomic Habits.
Absolutely. It's a good one. I think anyone interested in self-improvement can get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our listeners are really into this kind of thing, like how to build better habits. And this book by James Clear, it's packed with good stuff.
It is.
One of the things that really got me hooked right away was this story about the British cycling team.
Okay, yeah.
So they were kind of like, not really on the map for decades. And then they bring in this guy, Dave Brailsford, as their new performance director. And all of a sudden, things change. What did he do?
Well, it wasn't some big, like inspirational speech or anything. It was much more methodical than that. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains, this idea.
The aggregation of marginal gains.
Yeah, so like instead of looking for this one big thing to change, he was just obsessed with finding all these tiny little areas where they could improve by like 1%.
1%. Okay, so we're talking small incremental changes. What are we even talking about here? What kinds of things?
I mean, you name it. They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable. They tested different fabrics to find ones that were lighter and more aerodynamic for the jerseys.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, they wanted to optimize everything. They even figured out the best pillow for the cyclists to sleep on.
Really? The pillow? Oh, wow.
It sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, it seems a little out there.
Mm.
But I'm guessing there's a reason why he was so focused on these tiny details.
There is, yeah. He understood the power of compounding. So even if it's just a 1% gain, if they did it consistently over time, those gains would build on each other, and eventually it would lead to these huge results.
And that's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
They went from being the laughing stock to dominating the Olympics and the Tour de France.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
It's a pretty amazing example of how these small changes can really add up if you stick with it.
Yeah, for sure. And it applies to, so many areas of life, not just cycling.
Makes you kind of think about all those little things that we could be doing better in our own lives, right? But it's we've all been there, right? We start a new diet, super motivated, and then a couple weeks later, we're back to eating chips on the couch.
It's so easy to fall back into old patterns.
It is. It's why is it so hard to stick to new habits, even when we know they're good for us?
It's a great question, and James Clear really digs into this in Atomic Habits. We tend to focus so much on setting these big, ambitious goals, which, hey, goals are important for direction, but he makes this point, I think it's so key. He says, systems are best for making progress.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey, right? Okay, but what does that actually look like when we're talking about building habits?
It's about understanding the underlying mechanics of how habits actually work. Clear breaks it down into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, reward. Think about it like this. Let's say you're curled up with a good book, and all of a sudden you smell freshly baked cookies.
Oh, man, I'm already there.
Right. That amazing smell, that's your cue.
Okay, so then what?
Then comes the craving, that desire to taste those warm, gooey cookies, and the response, you getting up and grabbing 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah, a handful.
Exactly. And then the reward, of course, is that sweet, delicious satisfaction with every bite.
See, it's my brain is already wired to respond that way, even though I know I should probably go for a piece of fruit or something.
Right, but here's the thing. Just like our brains learn these automatic responses, we can actually rewire them to build healthier habits. We can use this same 4-step process to our advantage.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we hack the system?
One of the most powerful strategies is something he calls habit stacking. And it's really simple, actually. It's basically just linking a new habit onto an existing one. Let's say you want to start meditating every morning.
Yeah, I've been meaning to try that.
Right, but you never seem to find the time. Well, instead of trying to force it in, try stacking it onto something you already do consistently. Let's say you make a cup of coffee every single morning.
Every morning, yeah.
So after you pour your coffee, that's your cue to sit down and meditate, even just for a few minutes.
So over time, I'm basically training my brain to associate making coffee with taking that time to meditate.
Exactly. The more you pair those 2 actions, the stronger that connection becomes. It's like creating a mental shortcut.
I like it. But, sometimes it feels like it's not just about my own willpower. It's my environment is working against me too,
You're hitting on a really important point, and it's something Clear talks about a lot, the power of environment design. Basically, this idea that our surroundings, often in ways we don't even realize, are having this huge impact on our behavior.
So you mean we can actually design our spaces to make it easier to make good choices?
Exactly. It's about making those good habits obvious and the bad ones kind of invisible.
Okay, I like that.
Like, you want to read more, right? So keep a book on your coffee table where you'll see it, instead of tucked away on a shelf.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind, as they say.
Exactly. Or, if you're trying to cut back on screen time, move those tempting apps off your home screen.
Oh, yeah. Put them in a folder, maybe, or something.
Yeah, make it just a little bit harder to get to them.
I like it. It's amazing how these small tweaks can make a difference.
It really is.
You know, there's one more thing from the book that I wanted to touch on, this idea that our habits aren't just like random things. They're actually driven by something deeper.
Oh, you're talking about the identity piece.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the real why behind our habits?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Clear talks about how our habits are often modern-day solutions to ancient desires. It's like, think about our ancestors thousands of years ago. What were their primary drives?
Survival.
Well, yeah, but even more basic than that. I mean, they were driven by this need for connection, for safety, for belonging.
Right, like those core human needs.
Exactly, and those needs are still hardwired into us, even if we're not consciously thinking about them all the time.
Okay, that makes sense.
So take a habit like constantly checking social media.
Oh, yeah. Guilty as charged.
Right, but like, why do we do it? It's not just because we're addicted to our phones.
Right.
On some level, it's probably fulfilling that ancient need for connection, even if it's not the most fulfilling way to do it.
That's so true. It's like this quick hit of feeling connected, even if it's just superficial.
Exactly. Or think about the habit of reaching for comfort food when we're stressed.
Oh, man, don't even get me started.
But it makes sense, right? We're seeking that primal sense of security and comfort that food provides.
So once we kind of understand the why behind our habits, those deeper motives, what can we do with that?
That's where the real power comes in. Because instead of just trying to white-knuckle our way through breaking bad habits, we can start to identify those underlying needs and find newer, healthier habits that satisfy them in a more fulfilling way.
I like that. So instead of scrolling through social media for a sense of connection, maybe I call a friend or, I don't know, join a club or something.
Exactly. Or instead of that second helping of comfort food, maybe it's like going for a walk in nature or trying a quick meditation to find that sense of calm.
It's about understanding the root of the behavior and finding a more positive outlet. That's really insightful.
I think so, too.
But let's be real, we're human. Even with the best intentions and all the right strategies in place, we're still going to slip up sometimes. What happens then? What does Clear say about getting back on track when we, inevitably fall off the wagon?
Yeah, he has some great advice for that. One of the things he talks about is habit tracking.
Oh, like using a planner or an app or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's something really powerful about visually seeing your progress, like marking off those days on a calendar.
Oh, I totally agree. When I can actually see those days adding up, it definitely keeps me motivated.
It's like the little dopamine hit every time you check something off your list, right?
Yeah.
And then for those times when it's like even getting started feels impossible, he talks about something called the 2-minute rule.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, the idea is you take any habit, no matter how big or daunting, and you break it down into a tiny 2-minute version.
Okay, so like if my goal is to write for an hour, I just tell myself, just write for 2 minutes.
Exactly. Just get your butt in the chair and write something, anything, for 2 minutes. And the thing is, once you've overcome that initial resistance, you're much more likely to keep going.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Wow, this has been a really great deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much. Those tiny changes that add up over time, the importance of our environment, that our habits are driven by these deeper needs.
It's a lot to take in, for sure.
It is, but it's really empowering stuff. Like we actually have the power to change our habits, to design our lives, to become the best versions of ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And the best part is you don't have to do it all at once. Just start small, experiment, figure out what works for you.
And be kind to yourself along the way.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a race.